The fluorescent lights of Carver's electronics buzzed faintly over the aisles of gadgets and gizmos, casting a sterile glow across the small-town store in Macon, Georgia. It was a humid Saturday afternoon in July, the kind where the air sticks to your skin and the cicadas hum like a chorus outside. The shop was a local staple, its shelves stacked with phone chargers, earbuds, and budget laptops, the front window plastered with "back-to-school sale" signs. Inside, the hum of an old AC unit battled the heat, while a radio played soft R&B, barely audible over the chatter of a few customers browsing. At the counter, a middle-aged man named Randall Hayes, the store manager, stood with his arms crossed, his thinning hair slicked back, his eyes scanning the aisles like a hawk guarding his nest. His Carver's polo shirt was tight across his paunch, his name tag slightly crooked, but his authority was unmistakable, or so he thought. Near the back, by the display of smartwatches, stood Jamal Carter, a lanky 17-year-old with a quiet intensity. His dark skin contrasted with his faded gray hoodie and jeans, his sneakers scuffed from summer pickup games at the rec center. His close-cropped hair was damp with sweat, and his backpack, slung over one shoulder, held a notebook and a prototype circuit board he'd been tinkering with all week. Jamal's eyes, sharp and curious, flicked over the smartwatches, not because he planned to buy one, he couldn't afford it, but because he was studying their design, comparing it to the wearable tech he'd been coding in his bedroom. He was a senior at Macon Central High, a kid who taught himself to code at 12, built his first app at 14, and founded a startup at 16, though nobody in Carver's knew it. To them, he was just another teen, and to Randall, he was already a suspect. Jamal had felt the stare from the moment he walked in, Randall's eyes tracking him like a spotlight. He was used to it, grocery stores, gas stations, even the library sometimes, the way certain folks watched him, waiting for a slip-up. Growing up black in Macon wasn't easy, but Jamal had learned to keep his head down, let his work speak. His startup, Carter Tech, had just landed a small angel investment, enough to prototype a health monitoring wristband for low-income communities, but he kept it quiet, not wanting the attention. Today, he'd come to Carver's to check out competitors, maybe grab a cheap USB cable, but Randall's glare was making it hard to focus. At the counter, Randall muttered to his cashier, a young woman named Tammy, his voice low but carrying. "Keep an eye on that kid," he said, nodding at Jamal. "Looks like trouble." Tammy, barely out of high school herself, glanced at Jamal, her brows furrowing, but she nodded, her hands busy with a customer's receipt. Jamal caught the exchange, his jaw tightening, but he kept browsing, his fingers brushing a smartwatch, testing its weight. He set it down, pulling out his notebook to jot a design note, but Randall was already moving, his boots heavy on the linoleum, his voice sharp as he approached. "Hey, kid," he called, loud enough to turn heads. "You planning to pay for that, or just window shopping?" Jamal froze, his pencil pausing, his eyes lifting to meet Randall's, calm but wary. "Just looking, sir," he said, his voice steady, polite, the kind his mom had drilled into him for moments like this. But Randall's lips curled, his arms crossing tighter, his voice dropping to a growl. "Looking, huh? I've seen your type before. Don't think you can walk out with that." The accusation stung, and Jamal's hand tightened on his notebook, his heart quickening, knowing this wasn't about a smartwatch, it was about him, and Randall was ready to make it a scene. The fluorescent lights of Carver's electronics flickered over the cluttered aisles, casting a harsh glow on the shelves of phone chargers, earbuds, and blinking LED gadgets. The humid July air seeped through the glass doors, making the old AC unit groan in its losing battle against the Georgia heat. The soft hum of R&B from the store's radio was nearly drowned out by the cicadas' chorus outside, a relentless reminder of the Macon summer. At the back, near the smartwatch display, Jamal Carter stood with his notebook open, his pencil scratching a quick sketch of a wristband circuitry, his gray hoodie slightly damp from the walk over. His dark eyes were sharp, focused, dissecting the tech around him with a mind that had built apps and coded prototypes while his peers were still mastering TikTok. At 17, Jamal was a senior at Macon Central High, the quiet kid who turned his bedroom into a lab for Carter Tech, his startup aimed at affordable health tech. But to Randall Hayes, the store manager looming at the counter, Jamal was just a black teen in a hoodie, and that was enough to make him a threat. Randall's boots scuffed the linoleum as he approached, his Carver's polo straining over his paunch, his thinning hair slicked back, his eyes narrowed like he'd caught a thief red-handed. His accusation, "Don't think you can walk out with that," still hung in the air, sharp and deliberate, turning heads among the half-dozen customers browsing. Jamal's hand froze on his notebook, his heart kicking up a notch, but his face stayed calm, his years of navigating stares and suspicions keeping him steady. He'd felt Randall's eyes on him from the moment he walked in, the manager's muttered warning to Tammy, the cashier, not as subtle as he thought. "Just looking, sir," Jamal repeated, his voice even, polite, but with a quiet edge that made Tammy glance up from her register, her hands pausing on a receipt. Randall stepped closer, his arms crossed, his voice louder now, drawing more eyes, two middle-aged women by the phone cases, a guy in a trucker hat near the TVs, a teen girl flipping through earbud packages. "Looking ain't touching," Randall said, pointing at the smartwatch Jamal had briefly held. "You think you can just handle stuff and walk out? I know how this goes." The implication was clear, and Jamal's jaw tightened, his fingers gripping his pencil, the sting of "how this goes" hitting like a slap. He knew what Randall saw, a stereotype, not a kid who'd coded a health app downloaded by thousands, not a teen who'd pitched to investors in Atlanta last month. "I didn't take anything," Jamal said, his voice firm, meeting Randall's gaze. He set his notebook on the display, opened to his circuit sketch, and raised his empty hands, his backpack still slung over one shoulder. "Check me if you want. I'm here for a USB cable, that's it." The middle-aged women exchanged glances, one muttering, "He seems polite," while the trucker hat guy shifted, his eyes flicking between Jamal and Randall. Tammy, at the counter, bit her lip, her hands fidgeting, caught between Randall's authority and the unease creeping up her spine. The teen girl, earbuds forgotten, pulled out her phone, not to film but to text, her fingers flying, likely telling friends about the drama unfolding. Randall snorted, his smirk growing, his voice dripping with condescension. "Check you." "Oh, I will, kid. Empty your bag, now." He gestured at Jamal's backpack, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. The store felt smaller, the aisles closing in, the R&B fading as the customers' murmurs grew. Jamal's pulse quickened, but his training, hours in his mom's church, her lessons on staying cool under pressure, kept him grounded. "You got no reason to search me," he said, his voice steady, his eyes unyielding. "I didn't steal anything. You're assuming, 'cause of how I look." The word "assuming" landed hard, and Randall's face reddened, his smirk faltering for a split second before he doubled down. "Don't play that card with me," he snapped, stepping closer, his bulk looming. "I've been running this store 10 years. I know a thief when I see one." The middle-aged women gasped, one clutching her purse, the other whispering, "That's too far." The trucker hat guy frowned, his voice low. "Man, let the kid go. He ain't done nothing." Tammy, still at the counter, spoke up, her voice small but clear. "Randall, maybe we should just stay out of this, Tammy." Randall barked, cutting her off, his eyes never leaving Jamal. He pointed at the backpack again, his voice rising. "Empty it, or I'm calling the cops." The threat was a hammer, and the store went quiet, the R&B a faint hum, the cicadas louder now. Jamal's hand hovered over his bag, his mind racing. He could comply, prove his innocence, but that meant letting Randall win, letting the assumption stand. Or he could push back, risk escalation, and trust his truth to hold up. The teen girl by the earbud stepped closer, her phone down, her voice hesitant. "He wasn't stealing," she said, her eyes flicking to Jamal. "I saw him, he was just looking at the watch, writing stuff down." Randall turned, his glare silencing her, but her words hung there, a crack in his narrative. The middle-aged woman who'd whispered earlier nodded, her voice bolder. "She's right. He's been minding his business. Why you picking on him? The trucker hat guy crossed his arms, adding, "This don't look good, man. Back off." The customers were shifting, their unease turning to support, a small but growing chorus that made Randall's face twitch. Jamal seized the moment, his voice calm but commanding, his eyes locked on Randall. "You want to call the cops?" "Go ahead," he said, unzipping his backpack, pulling out his notebook, a laptop, and the circuit board prototype, setting them on the display. "But you're wrong about me. I'm not a thief, I'm building tech better than anything in this store." The circuit board, a tangle of wires and chips, gleamed under the lights, drawing curious glances from the teen girl and the trucker hat guy. Tammy leaned over the counter, her eyes widening, but Randall scoffed, his voice mocking. "What's that, some science fair junk? Don't change the fact you're trouble." The store's door chimed, and a new figure entered, a woman in her 40s, her hair in a neat bun, her nurse's scrubs faded but clean. It was Ms. Evelyn, Jamal's mom, who'd stopped by to pick him up after her shift at the hospital. She froze, taking in the scene, Randall looming, Jamal's belongings on display, the customers watching. "What's going on here?" she said, her voice low, a mother's steel beneath her exhaustion. Jamal turned, his voice steady. "Mom, he thinks I'm stealing. Won't let me shop 'cause of how I look." Ms. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her purse shifting to her shoulder, her voice rising, clear and fierce. "My son's no thief," she said, stepping toward Randall, her presence filling the aisle. "He's a straight-A student, runs his own company. You got no right to treat him like this." Randall's smirk faltered, his eyes darting to the customers, now openly glaring, but he held his ground, his voice defiant. "Ma'am, he was handling merchandise, acting suspicious. I'm protecting my store." "Protecting?" Ms. Evelyn said, her laugh sharp, her eyes burning. "You're harassing a kid who's smarter than you'll ever be. You want to call the cops? Do it. But you're about to learn who you're messing with." The customers murmured, the teen girl nodding, the trucker hat guy saying, "Listen to her, man." Tammy, at the counter, spoke up again, her voice bolder. "Randall, this is wrong. Let him go." The store was a pressure cooker, Randall's authority crumbling, and Jamal stood tall, his prototype gleaming, his truth a weapon Randall couldn't see, ready to change everything in Carver's Electronics. "All right, let's dive back into the pressure cooker that is Carver's Electronics in Macon, Georgia, where the air's thick with July humidity and the kind of tension that makes your palms sweat." The fluorescent lights buzz over the cluttered aisles, casting a harsh glow on Jamal Carter, a 17-year-old standing by the smartwatch display, his gray hoodie and scuffed sneakers unassuming but his dark eyes burning with resolve. His backpack's contents, notebook, laptop, and a prototype circuit board, are spread out, a defiant response to store manager Randall Hayes's accusation of theft. Randall, his Carver's polo straining, his thinning hair slicked back, looms with a smirk, his threat to call the cops still hanging heavy. Jamal's mom, Ms. Evelyn, in her faded nurse's scrubs, stands like a shield, her voice a steel blade cutting through Randall's bias. "You're about to learn who you're messing with." The store's a stage now, with a small crowd of customers, 2 middle-aged women, a trucker hat guy, a teen girl, and cashier Tammy, watching, their murmurs shifting from unease to support. The R&B on the radio's a faint hum, the cicadas outside louder, and the linoleum floor feels like it's about to crack under the weight of what's coming. Jamal's prototype gleams on the display, a quiet promise of his truth, and Randall's about to find out he's picked the wrong kid to mess with. Randall's face is a storm of red and sweat, his smirk twitching as Ms. Evelyn's words land, her nurse's calm laced with a mother's fury. He steps back, his boots scuffing, his arms still crossed, but his confidence is fraying, his eyes darting to the customers now openly siding with Jamal. "I don't need a lecture, ma'am," he snaps, his voice loud, trying to reclaim the stage. "Your kid was messing with my merchandise, acting shifty. I've got a right to protect my store." He jabs a finger at Jamal's backpack, his tone dripping with accusation. That bag's probably full of stuff he didn't pay for. I'm calling the police, and we'll see who's lying. Jamal's heart kicks up, but his face stays steady, his years of dodging stereotypes keeping him cool. He meets Randall's glare, his voice low, unyielding. Go ahead, call him, he says, gesturing to his spread-out belongings. But you're wrong. I'm not a thief, and this, he taps the circuit board, its wires and chips catching the light, is worth more than your whole display. The teen girl by the earbuds gasps, stepping closer, her eyes wide at the prototype. What's that thing do? She asks, her phone forgotten, her curiosity breaking the tension. The trucker hat guy leans in, his frown softening, muttering, looks like some serious tech. Tammy, at the counter, cranes her neck, her voice hesitant. Randall, maybe he's telling the truth. Ms. Evelyn's eyes flash, her hand on her hip, her voice rising, clear and commanding. My son's building technology to help people, not steal your cheap watches, she says, stepping toward Randall, her scrubs a badge of her own hard-earned respect. He's got a company, investors, a future you can't even dream of. You're not protecting your store, you're embarrassing yourself. The middle-aged woman near the phone cases nods, her voice bold. She's right. You're making a fool of yourself, accusing a kid with no proof. The other woman clutches her purse, her tone softer but firm. Let him be, Randall. This ain't right. Randall's smirk vanishes, his face darkening, his voice a growl as he pulls out his phone, dialing with shaky fingers. You're all ganging up on me, he mutters, his eyes flicking to the crowd, then back to Jamal. Cops'll sort this out. Suspicious behavior's enough for me. He speaks into the phone, his voice loud, performative. Yes, police. I need officers at Carver's Electronics, 5th and Main. Got a kid stealing, refusing to cooperate. The crowd gasps, the teen girl shaking her head, the trucker hat guy stepping forward, his voice gruff. You're way out of line, man. He showed you his stuff. What's your problem? Jamal's pulse races, but his mom's hand on his shoulder steadies him, her voice low, fierce. Stay strong, baby, she whispers, her eyes locked on Randall. This man's digging his own grave. Jamal nods, his hand brushing the prototype, his mind flashing to the hours spent coding it, the pitch deck he presented to investors, the dream of making health tech for folks like his grandma, who couldn't afford fancy wearables. He speaks, his voice clear, addressing the crowd as much as Randall. I'm not scared, he says, holding up the circuit board. This is my work, my company. I'm Carter Tech, and I'm building something to save lives. You think I'd risk that for a $50 watch? The crowd murmurs, the teen girl's eyes widening, whispering, Carter Tech. I heard of that, some app for heart monitoring, right? The trucker hat guy nods, pulling out his phone, not to film but to search, his voice surprised. Yeah, saw it on the news. Kid from Macon, right? Tammy, at the counter, speaks up, her voice bolder. Randall, stop this. He's legit. But Randall's too deep, his phone down, his face twisted with defiance. News don't mean nothing, he snaps. He's still a suspect till the cops say otherwise. The store's door chimes again, and two new figures enter, Reverend Thomas, a gray-haired pillar of Macon's First Baptist Church, and Ms. Lorraine, Jamal's computer science teacher from Central High. They'd been at the diner across the street, catching up after a church meeting, when Tammy's coworker, who'd slipped out to call for help, alerted them. Reverend Thomas, in a pressed suit despite the heat, takes in the scene, Jamal's belongings on display, Ms. Evelyn's fierce stance, Randall's red face, and his voice booms, deep and authoritative. What's this nonsense, Randall, he says, his eyes narrowing. You accusing Jamal Carter of stealing? This boy's a blessing to our town. Ms. Lorraine, her glasses perched on her nose, steps forward, her teacher's clipboard a familiar sight, her voice sharp. Jamal's my top student, she says, her eyes on Randall. He's got a tech company, one grants, mentors kids at school. You're making a mistake, and it's gonna cost you. The crowd shifts, the middle-aged women nodding, the teen girl whispering to her friend, the trucker hat guy muttering, "Told you." Randall's face twitches, his voice faltering. I'm just doing my job, he says, but his phone still in hand, the police call a ticking clock. Ms. Evelyn turns to the crowd, her voice rising, a preacher's cadence in her nurse's scrubs. "Y'all know Jamal," she says, her eyes sweeping the store. "He's our son, our neighbor, our future. He's building tech to help us, and this man," she points at Randall, "thinks he's a thief 'cause of his skin. You gonna let that stand?" The crowd roars, the middle-aged woman saying, "No way," the trucker hat guy adding, "This is messed up." The teen girl steps forward, her voice clear. "I saw the whole thing. He didn't steal nothing." Tammy, at the counter, nods, her voice firm. "I'm with them, Randall." "You're wrong." Randall's phone buzzes, a police dispatch confirming officers en route, and his smirk returns, a desperate grasp at control. "Cops'll settle this," he says, pointing at Jamal. "You and your fancy board don't scare me." But Reverend Thomas steps closer, his voice a rumble, his presence a wall. "You're calling the law on a boy who's done more for Macon than you ever will," he says, his eyes boring into Randall's. "I've known the Carters my whole life. You're not just wrong, you're shaming this town." Ms. Lorraine pulls out her phone, not to film but to show a photo, a news article about Carter Tech's grant win, Jamal shaking hands with a state senator. "This is who you're accusing," she says, holding it up, the crowd leaning in, the teen girl gasping, "That's him." The trucker hat guy nods, his voice gruff. "Man, you're in deep now." Jamal's eyes meet his mom's, a spark of pride breaking through his tension, his voice steady. "I told you, Mr. Hayes," he says, tapping the prototype. "I'm not what you think. And you're about to find out how wrong you are." The store's door chimes again, and two police officers step in, their badges glinting, their hands on their radios. The crowd hushes, the R&B fading, the cicadas a distant hum. Randall's smirk widens, but Ms. Evelyn's eyes don't waver, Reverend Thomas's presence looms, and Jamal stands tall, his prototype a beacon, ready to turn Randall's accusation into his own undoing. Have you ever seen someone judged unfairly but prove their worth? Share your story in the comments, I'm reading every one. Let's dive back into the pressure cooker that is Carver's Electronics in Macon, Georgia, where the air is thick with July humidity and the kind of tension that makes your pulse race. The fluorescent lights buzz over the aisles, casting a stark glow on Jamal Carter, a 17-year-old standing tall by the smartwatch display, his gray hoodie and scuffed sneakers a quiet contrast to the fire in his dark eyes. His backpack's contents, notebook, laptop, and a gleaming prototype circuit board, are laid out like evidence, a defiant stand against store manager Randall Hayes' accusation of theft. Randall, his Carver's polo stretched tight, his thinning hair slicked back, clutches his phone, his smugness fraying as two police officers step through the door, their badges glinting under the lights. Ms. Evelyn, Jamal's mom, stands like a fortress in her nurse's scrubs, her fierce gaze locked on Randall. Reverend Thomas, a pillar of Macon's First Baptist, looms with a preacher's authority, while Ms. Lorraine, Jamal's computer science teacher, holds up a news article on her phone, showcasing Carter Tech's grant win. The small crowd, two middle-aged women, a trucker hat guy, a teen girl, and cashier Tammy, is a chorus of support, their murmurs turning to outrage as Randall's bias is laid bare. The R&B on the radio's a ghost, the cicadas outside a distant hum, and Randall's call to the cops is about to backfire in ways he never imagined. The officers, Sergeant Davis, a broad-shouldered man in his 40s, and Officer Patel, a younger woman with a sharp gaze, pause at the threshold, their radios crackling, their eyes sweeping the scene. Davis's voice cuts through the silence, calm but commanding. "What's the situation here?" he asks, his hand resting lightly on his belt, his focus shifting from Randall to Jamal, then to Ms. Evelyn's unyielding stance. Randall jumps in, his voice loud, performative, his finger jabbing at Jamal. "This kid was stealing, messing with my merchandise, refusing to cooperate," he says, his smirk returning, his confidence bolstered by the badges. "I want him searched, arrested if need be." Jamal's heart thumps, but his face stays steady, his years of keeping cool under pressure holding firm. He meets Davis's gaze, his voice clear, unyielding. "I didn't steal anything, sir," he says, gesturing to his belongings on the display. "I was looking at a smartwatch, taking notes for my work." He assumed I was a thief because of how I look. Ms. Evelyn steps forward, her nurses scrubs a quiet badge of her own, her voice rising, fierce but controlled. "My son's no criminal," she says, her eyes boring into Randall. "He's a tech entrepreneur, building tools to help folks like us. You're harassing him for no reason, and we're not standing for it." Reverend Thomas's deep voice rumbles, his suit crisp despite the heat, his presence filling the store. "Randall, you've made a grave mistake," he says, his eyes locked on the manager. "Jamal's a pride of this town, and you're shaming us all with this nonsense." Ms. Lorraine holds up her phone, the news article about Carter Tech glowing, her teacher's voice sharp. "This is Jamal Carter," she says, turning the screen to the officers. "He's won grants, built apps, mentors kids. You're accusing a young genius, and it's gonna cost you." The crowd murmurs, the teen girl nodding, her voice bold. "He didn't take nothing," she says, stepping closer. "I saw the whole thing." The trucker hat guy crosses his arms, his voice gruff. "This is some bull, man. Let the kid go." Tammy, at the counter, adds, "Randall's wrong, officers. I tried to tell him." Randall's face twists, his smirk faltering, his voice rising in desperation. "They're lying," he snaps, pointing at the crowd, then Jamal. "That kid's got a bag full of who knows what, and this," he gestures at the circuit board, his tone mocking, "is probably stolen too." The accusation draws gasps, the middle-aged woman by the phone case is shaking her head, muttering, "Shameful." Officer Patel's eyes narrow, her voice calm but probing. "Sir, you're saying he stole that device?" she asks, nodding at the prototype, her gaze flicking to Jamal, sensing a deeper story. Davis steps closer, his eyes on the circuit board, his voice steady. "What's this thing, son?" he asks, his tone neutral but curious. Jamal seizes the moment, his voice clear, his hand brushing the prototype. "It's a health monitoring wristband," he says, addressing the officers, the crowd, his eyes steady. "I'm building it for Carter Tech, my company. Tracks heart rate, blood pressure, sends alerts to doctors, affordable for folks who can't pay hundreds for smartwatches." He picks it up, turning it to show the wires and chips, his passion breaking through his calm. "This is my work, my future. I'm not here to steal, I'm here to learn." The teen girl's eyes widen, whispering, "That's so cool." The trucker hat guy nods, pulling out his phone to search Carter Tech, his voice impressed. "Kids for real." The middle-aged woman smiles, her voice soft. "That's something special, son." Davis's brow lifts, his gaze shifting to Randall, his voice hardening. "You got proof he was stealing?" he asks, his hand gesturing to the prototype. Randall stammers, his phone slipping in his hand, his voice weak. He was acting suspicious, touching stuff, but Patel cuts him off, her voice firm. "Suspicious isn't evidence, sir. You called us over an assumption." The crowd murmurs, the teen girl saying, "Exactly." Tammy steps out from the counter, her voice clear. "He didn't do anything wrong. I saw it all." Randall's face crumples, his authority shattered, but he clings to his narrative, his voice a whine. "You can't just take their word. Search him." Ms. Evelyn's laugh is sharp, her hand on Jamal's shoulder, her voice a mother's thunder. "Search him, then," she says, her eyes locked on Davis. "You'll find nothing but his dreams. And when you're done, you owe my son an apology." Reverend Thomas nods, his voice a deep rumble. "This boy's a gift to Macon," he says, turning to the officers. "You know me, Sergeant Davis. I vouch for him, and so does this town." Ms. Lorraine steps forward, her phone now showing a photo of Jamal at a tech expo, shaking hands with a senator, her voice fierce. "You're not arresting a thief, you're facing a future leader. Think hard, Randall." Davis exchanges a glance with Patel, his hand dropping from his radio, his voice low. "Kid, show us your bag," he says, his tone more request than order. Jamal nods, unzipping his backpack fully, revealing books, a water bottle, and a folder of Carter Tech pitch notes, his hand steady. Patel inspects it, her eyes scanning the folder, her voice soft. "This your business plan?" she asks, holding up a document with the Carter Tech logo. Jamal nods, his voice calm. "Yes, ma'am. We're launching next year." She smiles, a faint nod of respect, handing it back. Davis turns to Randall, his voice hard. "No stolen goods here. You got anything else?" Randall's face collapses, his phone dropping to the counter, his voice a whisper. I thought, but the crowd's done," the middle-aged woman saying, "You thought wrong." The trucker hat guy shakes his head, muttering, "Big mistake, man." The teen girl claps, her voice loud. "Told you he was legit." Tammy's eyes shine, her voice firm. "I'm sorry, Jamal. This shouldn't have happened." The officers step back, Davis's voice final. "We're done here," he says, turning to Randall. "False call, Mr. Hayes. That's a problem. We'll need a statement." Ms. Evelyn's eyes meet Jamal's, her voice soft, proud. "You did good, baby," she says, squeezing his shoulder. Reverend Thomas turns to the crowd, his voice booming. "This boy's our future," he says, gesturing to Jamal. "Y'all spread the word, Jamal Carter's no thief, he's a builder." The crowd cheers, the middle-aged women clapping, the trucker hat guy nodding, the teen girl grinning. Jamal picks up his prototype, his heart full, his voice steady. "I'm not done," he says, eyes on Randall. "You'll hear my name again, and it won't be in your store." The officers nod, Patel's voice low. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Hayes." Randall slumps, his career teetering, as the crowd's applause fills Carver's, a spark of justice ready to ignite Macon. All right, let's bring this epic showdown at Carver's Electronics in Macon, Georgia, to a close with a bang that'll echo far beyond the store's flickering fluorescent lights. The July humidity still clings to the air, but the tension inside has broken, leaving a triumphant glow as Jamal Carter, a 17-year-old tech prodigy, stands vindicated against store manager Randall Hayes' false accusation of theft. The aisles of gadgets are quiet now, the R&B on the radio a soft hum, the cicadas outside a distant chorus. Jamal's gray hoodie and scuffed sneakers are unassuming, but his dark eyes shine with pride, his prototype circuit board, a health monitoring wristband for his startup, Carter Tech, gleaming on the display like a trophy. His mom, Ms. Evelyn, in her nurse's scrubs, stands beside him, her fierce love a shield, while Reverend Thomas and Ms. Lorraine, his teacher, have turned the crowd, two middle-aged women, a trucker hat guy, a teen girl, and cashier Tammy, into a chorus of support. The police, Sergeant Davis and Officer Patel, have cleared Jamal, their badges glinting as they eye Randall, whose smugness has crumbled, his Carver's polo sagging, his career teetering. The crowd's cheers still linger, Reverend Thomas's call to spread the word about Jamal's brilliance a spark ready to ignite Macon. This isn't just a win for Jamal, it's a victory for a community that's had enough, and the story's about to become a legend. As the officers escort Randall to the back office for a statement, his boots drag on the linoleum, his face ashen, his phone forgotten on the counter. Ms. Evelyn pulls Jamal into a hug, her scrubs soft against his hoodie, her voice a warm whisper. "You stood tall, baby," she says, her eyes shining with pride. "Your daddy'd be so proud." Jamal nods, his throat tight, his hand clutching the prototype, his mind flashing to his late father, a mechanic who taught him to build with his hands and dream with his heart. "Thanks, Mom," he says, his voice steady, a spark of resolve igniting. "This ain't the end." Reverend Thomas claps Jamal's shoulder, his suit crisp despite the heat, his deep voice carrying a preacher's weight. "Son, you've shown this town what faith and work can do," he says, turning to the crowd. "Y'all go tell this story, at church, at the market, at the barber shop. Let Macon know Jamal Carter's building our future." The middle-aged women nod, one saying, "I'll tell my book club," the other adding, "My nephew needs to hear this." The trucker hat guy, now a convert, grins, pulling out his phone, not to film, but to call his brother. "You gotta hear about this kid," he says, his voice gruff but warm. The teen girl, her earbuds forgotten, turns to her friend, her voice excited. "He's, like, a genius. I'm telling everyone at school." Tammy, behind the counter, wipes her eyes, her voice soft. "I'm sorry, Jamal. I should have spoken up sooner." Jamal smiles, his voice kind. "You did enough, Tammy. Thanks." Ms. Lorraine, her glasses glinting, tucks her phone away, the Carter Tech article still glowing in her mind. "You're speaking at our next STEM assembly," she tells Jamal, her teacher's tone leaving no room for argument. "Your story's gonna inspire every kid in Macon Central." Jamal nods, a shy grin breaking through, his prototype a quiet promise of more to come. The officers, wrapping up, nod to Ms. Evelyn, Davis's voice low. "Ma'am, your son's something special. We'll handle Mr. Hayes." Patel adds, her smile faint but genuine, "Keep building, Jamal. We're rooting for you." They head out, their radios crackling, leaving Randall to face his reckoning alone. By Sunday, Macon's alive with Jamal's story, not through viral videos or hashtags, but through the heartbeat of community, word of mouth spreading like wildfire. At First Baptist, Reverend Thomas weaves Jamal's stand into his sermon, his voice booming, "When the world sees a thief, God sees a builder," drawing amens and applause. At the farmer's market, the middle-aged women share the tale over peaches and collards, their book club planning to invite Ms. Evelyn to speak. The trucker hat guy's brother, a mechanic, tells his shop crew, sparking a fundraiser for Carter Tech's prototype. The teen girl's story spreads through Macon Central's halls, her friends downloading Jamal's health app, pushing it to the top of local charts. Tammy, shaken by her silence, quits Carver's, joining a community center to mentor kids, her apology to Jamal a turning point. Randall's fallout is swift and brutal. Carver's owner, alerted by Tammy's coworker, fires him Monday, his false accusation a stain the store can't afford. The Macon Telegraph runs a front-page story, teen tech star shuts down bias at local shop, with quotes from Reverend Thomas and Ms. Lorraine, Jamal's prototype photographed like a work of art. The article, shared at barbershops and diners, becomes a badge of pride for Macon's black community, a reminder that their kids can shine despite the odds. Randall's name fades, his "no loitering" sign a relic, his reputation buried under the weight of his own prejudice. Jamal's star rises. Carter Tech lands a major grant, fueled by the Telegraph spotlight, and his wristband prototype draws interest from a Savannah hospital, eager to test it for low-income patients. He speaks at the STEM assembly, his hoodie swapped for a blazer, his words inspiring a dozen kids to join the school's coding club. Ms. Evelyn, promoted to head nurse, starts a scholarship fund with church donations, naming it after Jamal's father, ensuring other Macon kids can dream big. Reverend Thomas hosts a community dinner, where Jamal demos his app, the crowd, elders, teens, families, cheering as it tracks a volunteer's heartbeat, a symbol of life and hope. Ms. Lorraine mentors Jamal's startup, her classroom a hub for young coders, while Tammy's community center partners with Carter Tech, teaching kids to build circuits. The story becomes Macon's legend, told at fish fries, choir rehearsals, and PTA meetings, a testament to a boy who turned bias into brilliance. Jamal keeps coding, his bedroom lab now a rented office, his wristband set to launch next year. He sketches new designs, his father's lessons in his heart, his mom's strength in his spine, knowing every door slammed in his face is one he'll build himself. Macon's not just a town anymore, it's a community that stood with him, and their voices carry his truth far beyond Carver's. This is what happens when you bet on the wrong kid, when a community says enough. Jamal didn't need cameras or hashtags, he had his work, his people, and a truth that outshone Randall's lies. So, what about you? Have you seen someone rise above prejudice or stood up for what's right? Share your story in the comments, I'm reading every one. If Jamal's fight lit a fire in you, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Let's keep building a world where every kid's a mogul, and no one's judged by their hoodie.